Hey everybody, welcome to Average Guy Opinions. I'm your average guy, John Corelli. Here we are on to part 2 of who knows how many. I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 of our brief history in weaponry and the military-industrial complex and how it's led to conflicts in the Middle East, and specifically today with Israel and Palestine. Like I say, these are they're going to be general cursory knowledge. Some of it, though, maybe a little esoteric. We'll see. So we talked about in part 1, I talked about, there was no we here, but I talked about part 1, the military-industrial complex, how that got started, and we'll continue through the century. So we're post-World War II now, right? We're in the 50s. Dwight Eisenhower's president, and Dwight Eisenhower is actually, for a military guy, and I think possibly the only military man with a strong military background, a 5-star general, one of the few five-star generals in the history of the nation to lead the country. And if you look at Eisenhower's presidency, he was actually very, very, it's a scary time. Here we are in the Cold War now, right? And the military-industrial complex is obviously very strong at this point. And it is, we are creating nuclear weapons because we're afraid of the Russians, or the Soviets, as they were called at that time. We are building... We're starting to build bases throughout the country, throughout the world, whether it's in Turkey or, in Germany or wherever. We are continuing that Cold War fear, and, NATO has been created, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Also, the Warsaw Pact on the other side has been finalized with the Soviets and the satellite nations of the Soviet Union. So it's a Cold War. It's a scary time, but it's also a great time. A lot of people still, MAGA people, I'll be mentioning MAGA people because this is some of the stuff they get into when they rub their chests and feel really good about how great the 50s were. The 50s were a really good time for this country in terms of economics. Socially, maybe not so great because we were still treating black people like shit. We were still treating any person of color that wasn't white and didn't have a penis like shit. But if you look at, there are a lot of reasons to look fondly upon that time because it was a time of great peace and great prosperity for this country. It really, really was. People were working. They were working hard. They were happy to work hard. They were earning good money and, making strides. The suburbs were booming. People were moving from the cities to the suburbs, and the suburbs became a legitimate place to live and build. And so it was, a lot of people look fondly back on the 50s, and who would blame them in a sense, right? There are a lot of good things. You're an average white guy. That's not the name of this channel. but if you are, and were back then, you could see why the 50s were amazing. And part of that amazement was a lot of policies and procedures that Eisenhower put into place. He did strengthen the military-industrial complex, but he also warned about it. In his farewell address in 1961, right before he, I don't know, it was the January 19th or 20th, but right before Kennedy was inaugurated, he gave a speech about the military-industrial complex and how we gotta kind of watch our asses here, right? Because hey, 2 years later, less than 2 years later, we're in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy's now president, right? And these things also rationalize, right, these conflicts and fears. Better dead than red. McCarthyism throughout the 50s. We're fearful of the Russians, the Soviets. I'll call them the Russians mostly, but at the time the country was the Soviet Union. You got oh gosh, I can't think of his name, Nikita Khrushchev, literally taking his shoe off and pounding it on the podium at the UN saying, "We will bury you," referring to the US. And so, the fears on both sides. Both countries are building up, trying to be, this is where the term superpower came in, right? So we got superpowers. And then with this is where we start getting into my final thesis, so to speak. This is where things start getting involved as far as the Middle East. Because what do you need to power a military-industrial complex and a war machine? You need oil, and you need a lot of oil. And Russia has oil, the United States has oil. But where do we have a lot of oil? The Middle East. So that's where we start getting into the politics of the Middle East and why we have a lot of issues today. So, and Eisenhower, to be fair, and I will refer to this book once in a while. It's called American Presidents in the Middle East. It's a textbook. I still have it, and it was it covered the presidents from Truman through Clinton. So basically, once Israel was created as a state in 1948, when Truman was president, all the way through Clinton, and until basically 2000, and all the different presidents' attitudes and policies affecting and with the countries not only near Israel, but the countries outside, far from Israel, and how we treated that part of the world. But let's be very honest here. It was based on oil. When we've gone into countries to liberate, it's been because of oil, whether it was the Gulf War in 1991, whether it was putting Saddam Hussein, and this is a little, I'll save this for the next video, but so let's work up. Sorry, I will get sidetracked from time to time. So back to Eisenhower, his policies, and how we moved forward, and how the military-industrial complex, despite his warnings, got very strengthened thanks to the event known as the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but Kennedy's policies kind of mirrored Eisenhower's policies as far as world politics. Kennedy had some different things to say about, especially about social justice going on in this country in the 60s, which would springboard pretty much upon his death in 1963. Horrible things happened, like Emmett Till. Obviously, 5 years after Kennedy is assassinated, his brother Robert Kennedy is also assassinated. So is Martin Luther King. Malcolm X is assassinated in 1965. Anyone that brought social justice in a radical manner, radical meaning, oh, black people and women actually have the same rights as us white guys. Those are the people that got killed. I mean, there's a long list. Forget the four I just named. But so that was the difference. A main difference between Kennedy and Eisenhower was the world stage. They pretty much approached the same. They wanted what would come to be known as détente in the 70s under Carter with the Soviet Union was also the same policy. We're just trying to avoid a war here. We're ready for it. We're building up our nuclear armaments. We're building up, we are continuing to strengthen this military-industrial complex, no matter how unhealthy that may seem or may end up. But here we are in the 60s, about to move into the 70s, and this is where, like I said a few minutes ago, where oil is key, and where we start getting into, we didn't begin it. The Brits really began it, because North Africa, people forget there was a North African campaign in World War II. A lot of people don't know about it, but that's how Hitler, he also went to Norway. Hitler, and I'm sorry, I'm going to split off just a little bit on Hitler, because Hitler went to Norway. The Scandinavian countries in general were trying to remain neutral. Norway was trying to, but they had a guy named Quisling who was leading the country at the time. Hitler went to them. Norway apparently has a lot of oil reserves. And so Hitler went up to Quisling and kind of threatened him and kind of worked him and finessed him. And Quisling said, okay, you can have our oil for your war effort. And it made it really easy because you're right across the sea, the North Sea, from Belgium and the Netherlands and England, right? So that became a huge threat and a huge bonus for the Nazis in World War II. And Quisling, by the way, the reason I bring this up, Quisling is actually, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's synonymous with traitor. People use the term Quisling. Even I knew people when I was earning my degree 30 years ago that knew what that meant, because it was used up in like Minnesota and Wisconsin, where there are people of Norwegian descent. A Quisling means a traitor, and that's why. Just to quickly hit upon the North African campaign, I'm sorry, this is what I do. I delve into World War II because it's fucking fascinating. But the North African campaign, and even the the southeastern European campaign, where Hitler unwisely went into Russia and the Ukraine, that was all about oil to fuel this huge Nazi Luftwaffe-driven, Panzer tank-driven war machine. You need a lot of oil, and that's how Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, got his name, because he wasn't getting any assistance from the Italians. The Italians are right across the Mediterranean from North Africa. They were supposed to supply Rommel, and they just couldn't, because the Allies would bomb the shit out of them. There's an old joke based on that. Say, hey, how do you get to see the Italian Navy? or no, why does the Italian Navy have glass on the bottoms of their boats? So you can see the rest of the Italian Navy, because they just sunk the shit out of them. And then Montgomery, the British general, was able to eventually just beat Rommel, not because he was a superior general. He was actually kind of a dipshit, but his supply chains weren't being cut off, you know. So eventually, they just kind of, it was a war of attrition, and Rommel had to. That's why he was the Desert Fox. They couldn't catch him, and he was really good at motivating his men and getting them to fight. And I'm sorry, like I said, this will probably turn into a 100-parter, but that's a little bit more into why we're there, and I'll get more into that on the next one, and get more modern with the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and all the wars and all the stuff that happened. I hope this is educational for you. I hope it's entertaining. And I'm sorry, you can hear me. I'm talking way more excited and way more quickly than I normally do on these videos. I only got 1 cup of coffee in me. This stuff just excites me, and why I probably should have been a history teacher, but hey, here we are. I'll teach a little history in these videos, and hopefully you'll learn something, and hopefully you enjoy it. Talk to you next time. Bye.